It is Thursday, February 15th, 2024. This is another edition of Baseball Today. That is not my man, Trevor Plouffe. That is the dude at John Boy Media, Jolly Olive. I am Chris Rose, producer Dan, along for the ride as well. You know, we're battling like a lot of the 30 clubs out there as they officially start spring training. Everybody's just trying to make it through healthy, and apparently Plouffe's a little under the weather. We okay? You got a late call, huh?
Yeah, a little under the wire, but anything for my good pal Trevor Plouffe. Hopefully, it wasn't Valentine's Day related. I'm hoping that nothing's going on with the whole household. He can just keep it contained. But I'm feeling good. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be live with you,
Yes.
Rose.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Your first time live on Baseball
Yeah.
Today, which is really cool. And once again, we're for our audience that is joining us live. Pretty soon, we're going to be going 5 days a week, which we're super excited about. And then we're going to start to work you guys in. We're still working through a few bugs and stuff. Producer Dan's been working his butt off on this whole thing. So let's get it going with some bad news for the reigning AL East champion Baltimore Orioles. They got the triple whammy on the injury front. Kyle Bradish sprained UCL. They're hopeful they'll have him at some point in 2024, but he's going to miss the start of the season. Same with their left-hander, John Means, who, of course, bounced back from Tommy John surgery a season ago, but he's been a little delayed in his throwing program, so he's about a month behind. And then your reigning AL Rookie of the Year, Gunnar Henderson, he's got an oblique issue. Those things can be tricky, although their GM, Mike Elias, said, we don't think that's going to affect his start for opening day. But let's talk about Kyle Bradish, who's a guy who finished fourth last year in the Cy Young Award, really kind of had this breakthrough season, and now they're hoping he'll be around for 2024, but they don't know. How big a blow could this be to the O's?
I mean, it's huge. I mean, Bradish had the second, or I think first best ERA in the American League in the second half. So it's a massive blow for the Orioles. This was their ace before Burns came around. It does make the Burns trade look all the more important and all the more better, because if the Orioles are in a situation where the Bradish injury hits and also the Means injury, and then they try to make this trade, I think teams can sense that desperation a little bit. Maybe the price would have been more to get someone like Corbin Burns. So on that front, I think the Orioles did okay. But yeah, a partial tear of the UCL. Bradish is going to try and pitch through it. We've seen this work out. We've also seen it work out not so much in the past. So the UCL is a very serious thing. Hopefully Bradish can make a speedy recovery, and hopefully he can be a part of the early first half of this 2024 team, because last year, not a lot went wrong for the Orioles outside of Felix Bautista. Very early in this year, we're already seeing things not going their way. So that's just the course of a baseball season, the course of 162. And hopefully this is where the injury bug stops biting them for the spring, but who knows?
So let's talk about where they are right now without Bradish and without Means. They've got Burns, they've got Dean Kramer, they've got Grayson Rodriguez, they got Tyler Wells, and probably Cole Irvin, who is a guy who was up and down after his his trade last year from Oakland. Now, they have arguably the deepest farm system in baseball. They've got 5 of the top 32 prospects, but Jolly, none of those guys are pitchers, right? They already graduated Grayson Rodriguez to the big leagues, but when you've got that much down on the farm, what does that allow you to do?
It allows you to potentially make another blockbuster trade. Are the Orioles there yet? I don't know, because I do still like the pitching on paper. Obviously, Corbin Burns is still there. Grayson Rodriguez, we saw flashes of that brilliance later in the season for him. I think he can put that together over a full season. Tyler Wells led the league in whip for a large portion of 2023 as well. Like, there are pieces here, but it's not as full as it was with Bradish and Means in there. So I totally get where you're coming from. I wouldn't be surprised if the Orioles do pull off another trade. Maybe not to the magnitude of Corbin Burns. Like, I don't see them making a play for Dylan Cease this late in the game, but I do think there is a pitcher to be added here, because as every team knows, you can never have enough starting pitching in a full 162 game season. And the Orioles don't really want to start the season thin, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. You need probably 7 starting pitchers that you feel good enough to at least put out there. I mean, the 7th guy, sometimes you're crossing your fingers when he gets out there, but there are some teams who you're like, man, when we get to number 4, we're not feeling all that good. But when you're a contender and a team that's coming off of a 100-win season and expects to contend for the AL East crown, the problem is that the division is so good and it's so deep, right? You could make an argument for probably any of the top 4 teams to win the division. Sorry, Boston, I'm going to put you in a separate category. But the rest of the teams are really deep and really good. And if one of those 4 teams wins the AL East, you're not going to be like, oh, my God, they won the division. So then you start to fight it out numbers wise for other teams in a wild card spot. It's just, I don't know how long they can wait on a guy like Kyle Bradish before they have to pull the trigger. Like, I wouldn't want to wait until mid or late July to figure this thing out. I think you got to put about a 2-month timetable on it. And by early June, if you're not seeing the progress that you want, then you got to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I know it's in a different vein because it was for a hitter, but this situation kind of makes me think of the 2021 Brewers, who got 2 months into the season, saw the anemic state of their offense, and decided, hey, you know what? We're going to do an early trade. Like, it's not, we don't have to wait until the deadline. They went out, they got Willy Adames, and they were great for the rest of the season. The Orioles might be in that situation. I think you have to look at your roster and maybe trust what you have on paper. But yeah, if you get to the end of May and that deficit in the division has grown to 4, 5, 6 games, it becomes go mode. Yeah, I'm not sure that you're going to be this on paper 100-win team again if you don't have the starting pitching to back it up. And the AL East is weird because you have a team like the Blue Jays who thrives on their rotation, and then you have a team like the Orioles who's going to beat you down and maybe score 7 runs a game. They're going to beat you in different ways, all these teams. So I'm very curious to see where the Orioles land with their starting pitching. But all it does is really emphasize the importance of Corbin Burnes in his contract year. It was already an important year for him. It becomes more so now because the Orioles are going to be leaning on him even more than they were, this time yesterday.
All right, let's move on to the team whose hat I am donning today. That would be the Texas Rangers, as the champs reported for duty this week. That is the first time I can ever say that about the team from Arlington, Texas. Their GM, Chris Young, he loves the makeup of this squad.
This group doesn't have to be anything more than what they have been. It's an extremely talented group. It's a great group of guys that love each other, that play the game the right way. And whether we're underdogs or whether we're there are more expectations this year, I don't think that matters.
All right, Texas is about to have its highest payroll ever in club history. But in your opinion, Jolly, did it do enough to give itself the best chance of repeating here?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because you obviously can't doubt them. They just won the World Series and they still have this world-beating lineup that they're going to add to in their own prospect pool. We have yet to see the greatness that Evan Carter can be. We only got him for, I think, 24 regular season games. Wyatt Langford sprung to the top of the prospect list. He's slated to make the team as well. It's the pitching that I think can raise an eyebrow or so because you have Nate Eovaldi and John Gray currently as their 1 and 2. And then the rotation, in my opinion, does thin out a little bit after that. It goes Heaney, Dane Dunning, and Cody Bradford. Obviously, if you're a Rangers fan, you're thinking, well, we could really use Jordan Montgomery. He was just with us. I'm sure he'd love to come back. But I think the Rangers have come out and said that they're pretty much done adding to this roster. This is going to be it. So I don't necessarily think the Rangers are going to take a step back. This is still very much a playoff team, in my opinion, but it's hard. We just had this conversation with the Orioles. It's going to be hard to go through a full 162 if you can't feel confident in your starting pitching day in and day out. So they're going to need younger guys to step up. They need a step from Dane Dunning. I think he has that in him, but I don't know. It does have me feeling a little bit uneasy as a third-party fan.
Dane Dunning actually pitched really well in the first half of the year. We were all like, that's the same Dane Dunning, right?
Yeah.
And then I thought to myself, well, how many guys are named Dane Dunning in baseball? So, yeah, of course, it's the same Dane Dunning, you moron. Right. They are basically trying to work their way through this thing and say, we've already made 3 mid-season trades. We just don't know when they're going to get here, right? Max Scherzer coming up with his back surgery. They're thinking June. They're keeping their fingers crossed for June. Molly, we don't know how he's coming along in his Tommy John surgery, and DeGrom. Hopeful for early August. I mean, that's great. You get all 3 of those dudes. The question is, where is this team going to be then? The AL West obviously does not have nearly the depth that the AL East has, but it does have Houston, which I think has played now in 17 straight ALCSs or something like that. Yeah, something like that. Seattle, which will always be interesting. And then you got 2 other teams which I think are still trying to figure it out. But once again, you're not just fighting it out in your division. You're fighting it out against those 4 other monsters from the AL East, and who knows who else can give Minnesota a run in the Central. Maybe some team can surprise and fight for a wild card there. I don't know. The Rangers, as good as they were the first 4 months of the year, they almost missed out on the playoffs.
Right.
I think Seattle finished 2 games behind them or something like that. Wasn't that right?
I mean, it was the ALS was hot potatoed last season. The Mariners
Right.
had control in, I think, August. Houston seized it on the last day of the season. And yeah, I mean, the regular season, we're not going to act like it doesn't matter, but the Rangers got to the dance. They finished the dance. They got the
Mhm.
job done. I'll be honest, I picked them to be a wild card exit. I had the Rays over them, but anything can happen in that gauntlet of October baseball. But it's exactly what you said. Where are you going to be when the time comes when you get these pitchers back? If you slot in DeGrom, Scherzer, and Molly into this rotation right now, I'm full on Rangers might be repeating the World Series because that's an impressive 1 through 5. But you're not going to have all these guys for even half of the season. So they're going to have to find some patchwork somewhere, whether it's in the free agent market or in their own depth. I'm really curious to see how their own depth pans out because they do have a lot of exciting young players, but in my opinion, it's kind of similar to the Orioles. I feel like a lot of those players are position players. I'm really excited for Langford and Evan Carter. I don't know much about the Rangers pitching prospect depth outside of Jack Leiter or Kumar Rocker, and I don't know if they're going to be ready this season.
Yeah, I mean, and Chris Young came out yesterday and said, "I don't think we're going to be adding any other faces," which
Right.
means that Jordan Montgomery is moving on somewhere else, and they're not going to be in the running for a guy like Blake Snell. So if it's somebody down the road here, it could be a 1-year deal for a veteran that could give him some innings. I don't know. I think it's risky at best. I think they've been playing behind the whole Bally Sports thing, that we don't know what our revenue is going to be from our local TV deal. I get it. You don't know that, but you also just want. Now, it's hard to take shots at a franchise which just spent $500 million on
Right.
the infield and
Right.
brought in Jacob deGrom for nearly $200 million. They're getting a deal financially on Max Scherzer because the Mets are eating such a significant portion of that trade. But they have done a lot in recent years, so it's hard for me to take a shot at them, unlike maybe some other clubs.
Yeah.
Uh,
Definitely agree.
so today's episode, by the way, is sponsored by SeatGeek. If you have no idea what SeatGeek is, where you been, man? They are the #1 ticketing app. It makes buying tickets super simple. More than 28 million downloads. That's not the only thing that makes them the #1 rated ticketing app. First of all, you shuffle through this thing when you download it on your phone or your computer, or whatever you need. There are more than 70,000 events every single day available on SeatGeek. So that includes sporting events, concerts, festivals, and oh so much more. But they want to take care of you. The thing I love is they provide the green dot. You've seen that green dot. You're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, well, those aren't floor seats, so these can't be the best seats in the house. No, but it is the best deal in the house. That means it is a good deal for you. You see a red dot? Even if you think it's a great seat, it might not be the best deal. So SeatGeek is looking out for you. Also, every ticket is backed by a buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek's the only site that lets you return your tickets ahead of the event with swaps for future dates. And we got the hookup here. You use the code TODAY, that is TODAY, $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. That is $20 off your first purchase with the promo code TODAY. Click on the link in the description. Download your app today. Go have some fun. I know I just used SeatGeek to purchase some tickets for this weekend for a little college hoops. So you can
Nice.
follow in my footsteps and maybe sit next to me.
Nice.
That,
Oh, yeah, I'll tag along. I'll go cross country. It'll be easy.
yeah, well, we're going midway.
Ah, okay. Good.
Yeah, it's not all that.
For me, right? Yeah.
All right, so we continue on. We're going to stay in the AL West and a little bit more injury news, at least in the rotation for the Houston Astros. We're also going to focus on their pen. Justin Verlander, he's a little bit behind schedule. He's got a bit of a bulky shoulder. He's just calling it a hiccup at this point, so he's going to kind of slow his rollout, if you will. In the meantime, rookie manager Joe Espada has made it official regarding the closer's role. Ryan Presley will primarily be the setup guy. That means their new almost $100 million closer, Josh Hader, will officially pitch the 9th inning.
I think ultimately in the game of baseball, roles are very important. We have routines as baseball players, and when you're able to get into that routine and knowing exactly what you have to accomplish, it makes the whole outcome of baseball games better. You perform better because you know what you have to do to accomplish that.
All right, what's the bigger pitching story with the Astros right now? The injury to Verlander and also JP Francis a little bit behind, or the bullpen?
I think it's the bullpen, but in a positive note, because Presley, I felt like it was implied that he was going to take a step aside, even though he has been so great for the Astros, because Josh Hader does have that resume. He does have the contract to go with it. It does make sense that he be getting those save opportunities. On the Verlander front, Mets fan here. I bore witness to him early last season, missing part of April with a teres major strain. He came back. He was still Justin Verlander. I expect that from him until the end of his career, which who knows? He may pitch until he's Jamie Moyer age at this point. So I expect that he's going to be fine and lead the rotation once he comes back fully healthy. They got to take their time with him because, age does play a factor into that. So the bullpen's standing out to me because I think that this is the real key for the Astros reclaiming, or I guess they did win the AOS last year. I always forget, but repeating as AOS champions. Hader, Presley, Brian Abreu, who was one of the best relievers in baseball last year, and then Rafael Montero, who they paid money to and expected to be great, took a step back in 2023, but still could be the guy he was before that. That's lethal, man. I mean, if you're trailing in the 6th inning, you're probably losing to the Houston Astros. So if I'm Ryan Presley, it might be a tough pill to swallow, but I got to be thinking in the back of my head, well, this is going to make the team better, so why not be a part of it?
Yeah, the Verlander stuff, shoulders always scare me a little bit.
Sure.
Particularly when you're 41 years old. Like, I could barely lift my arm above this, and I haven't thrown, major league pitches for 12. Yeah, really, I feel fantastic. Absolutely. I mean, just wait till you see me in the next warehouse
game.
No
pain in the eyes whatsoever. You look good.
Yeah, I've been off-season training. I feel great. Oh, God, that's horrible.
Lifting. Yeah, that makes sense.
They do have tremendous depth. I know that McCullers and Garcia are going to start the year on the shelf. They're going to work their way back at some point. You always forget they have Jose Urquidy. Like, he is the dude when you open up the tools, like, in your shed, and you're like, oh my God, I forgot I had that. That's the thing that can help me fix anything in the house.
Right.
By the way, I can't even tell you the last time I fixed anything. I mean,
you're not a Mr. Fixie. You're not a handy guy.
Oh my God, the worst. I start breaking out into like the meat sweats if I have to use my electric screwdriver.
That's very Hollywood of you, Chris Rose. Pay someone else.
It's not Hollywood. It's just basically, that's in my DNA. We're not blaming that on where I live. That is, you would think Cleveland, born and bred, tough guy can fix anything. No, I don't have that in me either. But Jose Urquidy is that guy. He can fix anything. I will say this that has been very interesting about the pen. We keep hearing that, Espada had the meeting with both Hader and Presley, and they kept him up to date on the phone when they were in negotiations with Hader. You know who the one guy we haven't heard from yet on this whole situation?
Who?
Ryan Presley.
Yeah.
When the news broke at Astros Fan Fest, he was the one. I think they had 17 players there. He was the one guy who didn't talk to the media, and I didn't begrudge him for it. It had just happened. He was probably dealing with it, trying to figure out what this means. Well, now he's had a few weeks. And yesterday, when they talked to Hader and they talked to Espada, Presley left early. So the media, now they're going to meet. They're going to talk to him at some point. I'm not saying he's dodging the media. All I'm saying is we haven't heard it out of his mouth that, hey, yeah, I'm 100% good with it. And I want to see how it's being said, too. I want to see his face because not that this could blow up in their face, but at some point, Josh Hader might struggle. Remember when he struggled right before he got traded from the Brewers? Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. If that happens here, you've got a dude who has helped them win a World Series, who has been incredible. I think he's gone like 20 straight playoff appearances without giving up an earned run. Like he's just not a guy that you're shoving aside. You're like, okay, we'll just move on. He has been legitimately great at times.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 points to be made here. One, contributing to the Brewers point you made before, when he got traded to the Padres, he was even worse. His ERA was 3 runs higher after the trade. He was just so sensational last year that I think you kind of write that off as a blip. As for Presley, since Game 4 of the 2021 ALCS against Boston, he has pitched 22 1/3 innings, 1 unearned run, 33 punch-outs to 7 walks. And that is a guy that you're going up to and saying, hey, man, we found someone to replace you. Take a step back. I understand it. I'm with you there where you're saying you understand why he took a step back at FanFest. The longer it gets, dodged, whatever narrative you want to spin out of it, the harsher the questioning I think will be, the more eyes will be on that interview. So I am with you in the fact that I'm curious to see how exactly he phrases it, how he takes it, how the clubhouse dynamic will work. But yeah, Houston is essentially giving themselves a very lucrative option in Hader. But if things don't go according to plan, because we've seen a ton of expensive reliever contracts not work out, They have a guy in Ryan Presley that they can say, hey, sorry, I think we messed up. The closer role is your role. And if it comes down to October pitching too, I mean, Hader has a good resume here as well, just not as spotless as Ryan Presley.
Yeah, I think he's had 16 postseason appearances. He's allowed runs in only 2 of them. One was in that
was the Grisham play, right?
Yeah, the Grisham play, and the other one was the Freddie Freeman home run.
Exactly.
When it was in Milwaukee. So he's done great too. I just want to hear from Ryan Presley, and I want to see him. I want to see his facial expressions the whole bit. All right. In the meantime, it sounds like the Phillies and Zack Wheeler are working toward an extension. Here is the right-hander.
It's not all about the money to me either. It took less to come here and be in a good spot and be happy, and my family be happy. So, I do want what I feel like I've earned, I guess you could say. But at the same time, you don't always get that. So.
Okay, so he is about to be 34 coming up in the spring. Extension sounds great until you're paying a guy who's 37 somewhere down the road, and now he can't eat innings for you and all that sort of stuff. Should the Phillies just let his contract play out and try and go younger instead?
I don't know, man. I mean, they've cultivated this wonder of having to compete with the likes of Corbin Burns or Max Fried or anybody else that's going to be on that market. So I think they're in a weird spot right now. It could be a mid-season thing because Philly has proven they're not afraid to spend money in any capacity to keep this group together. I just don't know where that number lands because I do think Wheeler deserves a big time contract for how he's pitched these past 3 years. If we're going on postseason resume, once again, he's been great in the playoffs for them as well. So it's in an odd spot. But if I'm Philly, I think I'm going to do whatever I can in my own range to keep Wheeler and Nola together because that is the best 1-2 they've had since those World Series teams in the 2000s with Hamels and Halladay and Lee. So I think that's prerogative number 1 because this offense is already sewn up for the next 3 or so years.
He said in that little media session that I want to get paid for what I've done. It's an alarming phrase, I think, for front offices.
Yeah.
And it's got to be a cautionary tale because that's where teams get in trouble is when you pay for what guys have done. There's that balancing act, right? Because if you're paying for the future and what you think a guy can do and you haven't seen it entirely, but I got to tell you, that's what Philly kind of did the first time with Zack Wheeler. They gave him $118 million. What was most Mets fans' reaction when they did that?
I think most Mets fans thought it was an overpay, and in retrospect, we're thinking, man, we feel stupid for not doing that.
Not only that, he's totally outperformed this contract.
Exactly.
And since 2018, he has been as dependable an every 5-day guy as there is in the bigs. I think since 2018, he's missed maybe like 10 starts that he could have made over that stretch, and that's about it. And on top of that, you mentioned it. When he gets to the playoffs, he's even a different animal. He'll give you 6 innings at least a playoff start. When we're going 2 times through an order and everybody's getting burned in the bullpen, this is the guy you can rely on to not only keep you in a game, but win you a game as well. And so, yeah, I would be willing. If I were Philly, I would definitely go 3 years. I could be talked into a 4th. A 5th would scare me, but that's kind of where I would land. And I do think that he deserves. Listen, he's dependable, so I'm giving him cash.
Yeah, I have one comparison that I want to make that I think will put it in a good scope too. Last year, Wheeler pitched in his age 33 season. He had a 3.6 ERA, made 32 starts, overturned to strikeouts, was very good. Chris Bassett last season, very similar, 3.6 ERA, 33 starts, 200 innings. Bassett signed for 3 years and $60 million with the Blue Jays, which at the time I thought was a steal. And I think he's going to continue pitching to that level, maybe even above so. So if you're Philly, is that the number you have in mind? Because in my original thought process, I was like, well, Wheeler might get 4 to 5 years. So I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe 3 years is the sweet spot. Is that going to be enough for an extension for Wheeler? Personally, I don't think so. And I think he would be able to get more in the free agent market, which leads me to believe this extension might not happen. I don't know.
It'll be interesting. All right, one more thing before we get out of here. The Nats have a very, very clever sign. I think it's a Mike Rizzo quote, if I'm reading this thing the right way. It says, in the bullpen, I don't care how hard you throw ball 4. Who is that guy that could bring the heat, but you were like, I don't think like eating Nuke LaLoosh that thing. I don't think he knows exactly where it's going. It's going to hit the bull.
I mean, First off, the quote is tough, especially for newer baseball fans, because basically every reply to that tweet I saw was, well, yeah, if you're throwing your 3-0 pitch at 81 in the middle of the zone, it's just going to get tattooed, in which case a walk is probably better in that case. As for a guy that was throwing cheese but couldn't find the zone, I mean, there's tons of Mets guys in recent memory that were throwing cheese, even though last year we had no one who threw 100 miles per hour. I'll go with Jake's sneaky love this reliever guy, Bryce Montes de Oca, who's currently injured. That guy has some wicked nasty stuff, just could not get it over the plate. So every time I watched him, and it was just kind of with a hopeful heart that he'd be able to find the zone. But it's tougher said, it's easier said than done, excuse me. So hopefully some Nats pitchers can harness that strength. But I don't know if I agree with the message of the sign.
I laughed. I chuckled at it a little bit. So there's two guys that come to mind for me. One was Mark Wohlers, who was on the mound when the Atlanta Braves won their first World Series crown in 1995 against my then Cleveland Indians. He was a dominant closer in the mid-90s, and then unfortunately could not find the catcher's mitt. I mean, it literally cost him his career. He could not. Oh, it was horrible. 1998. How about these numbers? 20 and a third innings. His ERA was over 10. Walked 33 batters in those 20 and a third innings and fired 7 wild pitches. Speaking of wild pitches, Rick Ankiel against the Atlanta Braves. 5 wild pitches in a divisional round series. I think it was right around 2000 or 2001. Eventually became an outfielder and made it back, and it is an amazing story. I think he even wrote a book about it. But, I mean, those are two guys in particular who, I mean, it was much more than a physical thing. It was a mental battle that they had to get through, and I hate even bringing them up, but, man.
Good answers.
It's tough. Tough. All right, dude. I'm sure we'll see you at some other point here on Baseball Today. We always appreciate your insight. You're always so well prepared and thorough, and everybody loves hearing from you. What else you got going these days? I know that, Shea Station's back, which is great.
Yeah. We haven't talked since then. Shea Station is back. We're doing an episode every 2 weeks. In the offseason, we'll be going weekly during the season. Jam baseball stuff right here on this channel every weekday. Jolly Olive, all that good stuff.
Great. Latest episode of the Rose Rotation is out with Giants hurler Logan Webb.
Nice.
He was great on it. We just recorded an episode with Austin Hedges. That'll come out next week. He has got an amazing story about the date. It might be the best call-up story I've ever heard.
Nice.
How he found out. And it was a current major league manager that was his minor league skipper at the time who gave him the call and got him good.
I'm racking my brain.
Yeah, it's really, really good stuff. So you'll tune into that next week. And we will be back on Baseball Today. We're going to try for Monday. We know it's a holiday, but we're going to give it a shot. We just hope that Plouffe feels a little bit better. So for our one-of-a-kind producer, Dan Rourke, and our MVP here at the John Boy Media, Jolly Olive, I am Chris Rose. We will see you next time here on Baseball Today.